Picture this. You are sitting in this hyper-modern, sleek virtual meeting room, right? The connection is flawless, the audio is crystal clear, and across the screen sits a very modern, very serious fintech executive. You know exactly where this is going. They don't say a word at first. They just drop a secure, encrypted cloud directory link into the chat. And in that folder is the entire blueprint for their next global app rollout. We are talking high-end cinematic video scripts, deeply nuanced social media strategies tailored for 20 different platforms, highly technical UI strings for a flagship digital wallet launch. I mean, the works. It is the absolute culmination of a full year of their internal development. So the executive leans forward, looks you dead in the eye through the webcam, and demands that this entire campaign be perfectly, flawlessly, culturally adapted and translated into 50 different languages. And here is the kicker, the absolute kicker. They expect it sitting in their inbox by tomorrow morning, and they expect to pay absolutely $0 for it. Oh, and just to add a little cherry on top of this impossible sundae, they make it abundantly clear that if a single localized compliance string is translated poorly and happens to violate a strict financial regulation in a major European market, the resulting PR disaster is entirely legally and financially your fault. It is the ultimate corporate stress stream, isn't it? But the terrifying thing for anyone operating in the language services industry right now is that this scenario isn't hyperbole anymore. That level of expectation, that absolute detachment from the reality of linguistic labor, is rapidly becoming the daily baseline reality of client demands. It is wild to witness. We are watching a total psychological shift in how buyers perceive value. If you are operating in localization and translation, you already know this is a long game. You have to adapt just to survive. This is Locanuku, localization news you can use. Today we are going on a mission. We are taking a deep, uninterrupted look into what we on the front lines are calling the Great Adjustment. We are unpacking the seismic, violent shift currently tearing through the language services industry. Artificial intelligence and large language models, or LLMs, those massive neural networks trained on vast amounts of text to generate human-like language, are completely warping buyer expectations. Buyers see a slick demo on a stage in Silicon Valley, and suddenly they are completely exposing the inherent flaws in our traditional pricing models. And I say exposing rather than crushing because the models aren't being destroyed. They are just being revealed for what they actually are. Despite the deafening noise and the absolute panic you might be seeing on your social feeds right now, the operational data we track day in and day out tells a very different, much more nuanced story. It really does. It is a story of survival, yes, but it is also about strategic price holding and a fundamental necessary shift to entirely new ways of working. Makes sense, right? The sky isn't falling, but the tectonic plates beneath our feet have completely changed shape. To understand where we are going, you have to understand what is currently bleeding out on the operating table. And what is dying right now is the per-word pricing model. Finally, right? Heading into 2025, a full 25% of language service providers are outright abandoning the legacy price per word model in favor of hourly rates, which is massive. A quarter of the industry just took a look at the way billing has been handled since the invention of the typewriter, and they walked away. It is a monumental shift, but frankly, it is long overdue. To understand why this exodus from the per-word model is happening now, you have to accept that the fundamental nature of the job has permanently changed. We have witnessed the total, irreversible demise of scratch translation. If you rewind 10 or 15 years, a linguist sat down with a blank screen on their left and a source file on their right, and they typed out the translation word by agonizing word, keystroke by keystroke. You billed by the word back then, because every single word required a physical action, a dictionary lookup, and direct localized mental processing. But today, nobody is translating from a blank page. If you are losing money. The machines do the heavy lifting up front now. They generate the baseline, and that reality has given rise to a whole suite of brand new technical services that you absolutely need to understand if you want to survive this adjustment. Clients aren't buying translation anymore. They are buying localized technical interventions. Let's break these down clearly because I want to give you the keys to unlock a whole new level of understanding. First up is MTQA, or Machine Translation Quality Assurance. Right now, for the uninitiated, you might think this is just proofreading. It is not. It is not at all. When you feed a massive corporate document into an LLM, the model works at the speed of light, but it is fundamentally a prediction engine. Sometimes it hallucinates. It confidently invents fabricated information that looks incredibly plausible. MTQA is the highly technical process of a human expert stepping in purely to ensure the machine didn't invent a new reality, alter financial figures, or completely break the XML formatting of the back-end code. You aren't translating. You are a forensic building inspector, making sure the AI didn't quietly remove the load-bearing pillars of the document. I'd argue MTQA is almost more stressful than scratch translation because you're hunting for invisible landmines. But then you transition into MTPE, machine translation post-editing. This is the controversial one, the one where industry debates get really heated. Buyers often confuse MTQA with MTPE, but they are totally different beasts. MTQA is just making sure the house doesn't burn down. MTPE is where a human expert goes in to smooth out the robotic, uncanny valley edges of the AI's output. The machine might get the literal dictionary meaning right, but the tone sounds like a dry, dusty 19th century legal brief instead of a snappy, modern TikTok marketing campaign, which is obviously useless for the client. The post-editor is tasked with breathing the human soul back into a synthetic text. And here is where it gets tricky. How do you quantify that? How do you charge per word for adding soul? You can't. You literally can't. And then we move to what I consider the hottest, most misunderstood skill right now, prompt engineering. Oh yes, I see so many traditional linguists rolling their eyes at this, thinking it's just typing questions into a chat box. It is so much more than that. It is deeply technical, preventative work. Prompt engineering is essentially whispering the precise algorithmic instructions to the AI so it doesn't fail in the first place. You are formatting the contextual boundaries, explicitly defining the brand persona, and setting the negative constraints so the AI generates an output that requires drastically less MTQA and MTPE down the line. You are building the guardrails, and those guardrails are built on the final pillar, data and AI services. This is the absolute bedrock, and AI is only as capable as the data it consumes. Garbage in, garbage out, always. Data and AI services involve the grueling, unglamorous work of building, organizing, aligning, and cleaning the massive proprietary linguistic datasets that feed these enterprise models. It is complex data wrangling. If your translation memory from a few years ago is full of outdated terminology and you feed it to an LLM, you are just going to scale your errors at the speed of light. It is a disaster waiting to happen. So, keeping those four new technical pillars in mind, MTQA, MTPE, prompt engineering, and data services, let me paint a brand new scenario for you. I want you to see exactly why billing by the word is a literal recipe for bankruptcy in today's landscape. Imagine a huge multinational agricultural technology firm. They have just spent a decade building a revolutionary AI-assisted automated combine harvester, and they have a dense, highly technical 400-page user manual for it. They take that entire manual and dump it into a highly trained custom enterprise AI. The AI translates the whole thing into French instantly. Boom. Done. But you obviously cannot just publish that. You can't just send that out to farming cooperatives in rural France. You need a highly specialized human expert, someone who holds degrees in both the French language and complex agricultural mechanics, to meticulously review the safety warnings. Because the stakes are literal life and death out in the fields. They have to ensure that the AI-specific phrasing won't accidentally cause an operator to misinterpret a calibration step and make a fatal error with heavy machinery. So this expert sits down. They spend 5 grueling, highly stressful hours verifying the text. But because the AI did a generally spectacular job on the syntax, the expert only actually alters 25 specific words across those entire 400 pages. That scenario is the perfect, terrifying encapsulation of the crisis we are in. Look at the math. If you force that agricultural tech expert to bill per word for the 25 words they actually changed, or even if you pay them a fraction of a cent for the words they merely reviewed, They are making absolute pennies, pennies for over half a day of life-saving, highly specialized, intense cognitive labor. The per-word model fundamentally punishes efficiency. It actively penalizes the very technology the industry is adopting, and it completely ignores the massive legal liability and specialized expertise the human is carrying. The value you are providing to that ag tech company is your time, your liability absorption, and your specialized technical knowledge. It has absolutely nothing to do with your keystrokes. It makes charging by the word look totally absurd. It looks like malpractice. But that brings up a massive rhetorical question for you. If hourly billing is so obviously the savior of our margins, and 25% of the industry has already made the leap, why are 75% of providers still holding out? Why are they terrified to drop the per word rate when it's actively bleeding them dry? Because you have to look at who is actually signing the checks. It comes down entirely to the psychology of enterprise procurement managers. When large global corporations buy localization services, the people making the final purchasing decisions aren't linguists. They aren't localization directors. They are procurement officers. Their entire professional existence revolves around mitigating financial risk, improving cost efficiency through standardized spreadsheets. Always spreadsheets. They demand apples to apples comparisons. If vendor A bids 10 cents a word and vendor B bids 12 cents a word, the procurement manager can easily justify choosing vendor A to their boss. It fits neatly into a cell in Microsoft Excel. It is the path of least resistance. It requires zero critical thinking on the buyer's part. The moment you walk into a vendor pitch and say, actually, we don't charge by the word anymore. We charge a flat monthly retainer for access to our secure AI pipeline, plus a blended hourly rate of $90 for our MTQA specialists. You can just see their eyes glaze over. The procurement manager's brain completely short circuits. They have no historical baseline to compare that against. It requires the language service provider to expend a massive amount of unbillable energy educating the buyer on why the old model is dead. And frankly, for 75% of the industry, especially the mid-sized agencies, they just don't have the leverage, the brand power, or the sheer energy to fight that battle yet. They are just exhausted. They stick to the per-word rate out of sheer desperate survival instinct, quietly eating the losses on the back end just to keep the contract, which is a tragic way to run a business. So, what is the strategic takeaway for you right now? It is that you have to start splitting your pricing immediately. You can no longer bundle your back-end technology and your human hours into a single opaque, blended per-word rate. You have to aggressively separate the invoice. You charge a specific line item for the technology, the software licensing, the API access, the machine translation engine maintenance, and then you charge a completely separate hourly rate for the expert human services. If you do not decouple the machine from the human on your invoice, the client will naturally assume the human's value is dropping exactly as fast as the machine's computational cost. And that decoupling is the only way forward, because failing to do so leads right into the absolute nightmare we are seeing regarding AI delusions. Oh, the delusions. There is a terrifying buyer perception gap right now, and it is entirely fueled by mainstream hype. The hype cycle is completely out of control. I hear this from vendors every single day. Buyers are sitting on their couches watching the evening news. They see a tech CEO demonstrate an AI generating a photorealistic video of an astronaut surfing a solar flare on Venus. Or they see an LLM write a passable epic poem in classical Latin in 3 seconds. They see these parlor tricks, and they instantly assume that 99% of enterprise-grade, highly secure, culturally nuanced localization is now free, instant, and flawless. And that profound misunderstanding leads directly to what we call the 1% dilemma. This is the friction point causing the most burnout in the industry right now. A corporate buyer decides they are going to be a tech-savvy hero and save their department a fortune. They take their sensitive corporate communications, run them through a free public LLM, and get a file back that looks, to their untrained monolingual eye, about 99% complete, because it reads fluently, exactly, it reads smoothly. They then hand this file over to a professional language provider and say, hey, We did all the heavy lifting for you. Just give this a quick final polish. It should take you 10 minutes. But the final polish is where all the actual danger lives. It's a trap. Finding the 1% of fatal errors hidden within 99% of perfectly fluent, highly confident sounding AI text is actually exponentially harder. It requires significantly more cognitive load than translating the document from scratch because you are lulled into a false sense of security. The AI doesn't make obvious grammar mistakes anymore. It doesn't misspell words. It makes deep, contextual, catastrophic logic errors. It might invert the meaning of a legal clause while maintaining perfect syntax. So the language provider actually has to charge a premium for this highly technical forensic fix. And when the buyer gets the invoice for that quick polish, they are absolutely outraged. They lose their minds. They feel scammed because in their mind, the machine already did the work, which results in the dreaded middle manager email. If you work in this space, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I heard about a vendor practically in tears last Tuesday over one of these. They are brutal. It's a blunt, non-negotiable email from some mid-level director who clearly just got back from a free webinar on the AI revolution. The email says something to the effect of, effective next quarter, we expect an across-the-board rate cut of 40% due to your newly gained AI efficiencies. Get used to the new reality. Sign the amendment or we take our business elsewhere. It is infuriating, but you have to look at the why behind that email. Why are they doing it? The reason you are receiving those ultimatums is because those middle managers are totally blissfully blind to your massive internal operational costs. They see an LLM as a magic wand that instantly evaporates your overhead. What they do not see is the terrifying amount of capital you just had to deploy to build an enterprise-grade, hyper-secure, SOC 2-compliant AI infrastructure just to protect their data, to guarantee their proprietary data won't be leaked back into the public internet to train a competitor's model. They don't see the heavy tech investments, the skyrocketing API costs, or the fact that you had to completely restructure your staff and hire wildly expensive data engineers just to make that AI magic work safely. Your operational costs actually went up significantly to adopt this tech, but the client is blindly demanding your prices go down. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We have to talk about the volume paradox. This is the great irony of the last 2 years. We watched major language providers completely panic and build these massive, hyper-efficient, human-in-the-loop AI pipelines. They invested millions. They optimized every single workflow. They built this infrastructure on a massive assumption. They assumed that because translation could theoretically be cheaper and faster now, global clients would naturally want to translate 10 times as much content. It was a logical assumption. It makes sense on paper, but it completely misjudged the bottleneck. The bottleneck isn't the translation anymore. It is the source content creation. Global businesses simply haven't scaled their own internal content creation pipelines fast enough to feed the translation beast. They physically can't. Marketing departments, technical writers, legal teams, they physically cannot write source content fast enough. So what you have right now are language providers sitting on Ferrari-level, multi-million-dollar infrastructure capable of processing millions of words a day. But they are idling, just revving the engine in the garage. They are waiting for a massive tsunami of source volume that is currently only trickling in like a leaky faucet. You built a 10-lane superhighway, but there are only 3 cars on the road. It is maddening. You have all this capacity and nothing to feed it. And this exact paradox is why you hear so much doom and gloom in the community. The panic is palpable. If you go to any industry networking event right now, or if you read the comments on any localization forum, people are whispering about this apocalyptic narrative. You hear wild rumors. The rumors are out of control. Someone told me last month that 15% of independent QA testers just packed up, quit, and retrained as HVAC technicians. People genuinely believe the entire industry is collapsing under the weight of AI efficiencies. That narrative is intoxicating because fear sells, but we have to ground ourselves in the actual data. The data dispels that apocalyptic narrative entirely. Yes, the landscape is shifting violently. Yes, workflows are unrecognizable compared to 3 years ago. But when we look at the numbers, overall staffing across the global industry is only down about 5.5%. That is not a collapse. That is a macroeconomic correction. And despite all the noise, the industry as a whole is still experiencing humble, consistent year-over-year growth. We are expanding. It is a painful adjustment for many, but it is absolutely not the death of the industry. And when you look at how providers are actually handling their pricing amidst all this chaos, you see what we're calling the 80% reality. Heading into 2026, a massive 80% of providers are holding their prices perfectly steady. They are not giving in to the middle manager emails. They are holding the line. That takes guts. 14% are actually confident enough and specialized enough to raise their prices, which is incredible. And only a tiny, terrified 6% are actively dropping their rates to win the race to the bottom. If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, I have to throw some cold water on that 80% metric. Holding your prices steady in this economy is not a victory lap. It's a slow bleed. You have to understand the painful math of holding steady. If your top line prices are flat, but global inflation is driving up the cost of living for your human experts, and software licensing fees are skyrocketing, and cloud computing costs are going through the roof, you are experiencing a severe compounding loss in purchasing power. You're bringing in the exact same dollar amount as you did in 2023, but those dollars buy you 20% less in reality. Ouch. Add to that the massive capital required for the research and development and tech adoption we just talked about, the secure pipelines, the data wranglers. And these providers who are holding steady are effectively doing significantly more complex work, carrying a lot more technical risk for substantially less real-world money. That is a brutal squeeze. But here's the silver lining in all of this pressure. Hardship breeds creativity. When you are squeezed this tightly by the market, you are forced to innovate just to keep the lights on. Which brings us to the most critical, actionable part of our discussion today. How are the smart, resilient providers actually surviving this squeeze? How are the ones who are raising their prices doing it? They aren't just crossing their fingers. They are actively deploying 5 specific margin protection strategies, the survival toolkit. If you want to survive the great adjustment, you need to deeply understand and likely implement these within your own operations. We're going to spend some serious time unpacking these. Let's start with strategy 1, the talent pivot. The talent pivot is entirely about following the margins. As the demand for traditional scratch linguistic translation plummets, the smart agencies are fundamentally altering their hiring profiles. They are moving away from hiring traditional linguists whose primary skill is just bilingualism. Instead, they are heavily onboarding AI specialists, data wranglers, computational linguists, and prompt engineers, the tech-heavy folks. They are looking for people who understand the architecture of language as data, because the margins are infinitely healthier in high-value data work. Think about it strictly from a supply and demand economics perspective. You can throw a rock and find 10,000 people who can adequately translate a basic customer service chat log from English to Italian. That is a commodity. But finding someone who understands English, understands Italian, intimately grasps the cultural nuance of hyper-localized Milanese fashion slang, and knows how to write Ruby scripts to scrub and clean a dataset of 1 million support tickets to properly train a custom LLM, that person is an absolute unicorn. And you can charge a massive, highly profitable hourly premium for a unicorn. You have to pivot your talent pool away from what the AI can mimic and move them into the spaces where the AI cannot reach yet. That leads directly into strategy 2, which is arguably where the language services industry has failed the hardest historically. It is curing the account management disconnect. We are so incredibly terrible at bragging about our own innovations. We hide our light under a bushel, and it's costing us leverage. Language providers have been doing absolute magic with back-end automation for years, decades even. Long before the current LLM craze, providers were quietly building custom API connectors, automating complex file routing, and using early machine learning models to parse impenetrable XML strings. But the clients never knew it. We hid the plumbing because we thought clients only cared about the clean water coming out of the tap. They literally think you were just manually downloading attachments, passing files back and forth via email to a freelancer in a coffee shop, and sending it back. That is the exact perception. The client has absolutely no idea that you built a proprietary automated supply chain management tool specifically to handle their account. No idea. So when that client comes to you today and says, hey, we want to use AI to cut our localization costs, you are sitting there pulling your hair out, thinking, I've been using AI and automation to save you money behind the scenes for 3 years. To survive now, you have to proactively, aggressively market your hidden innovations. You have to pull back the curtain, show them the custom routing dashboards, walk them through the workflow efficiencies you engineered. You have to explicitly sell the plumbing you built. Because if the client doesn't know you built the plumbing, they will never pay you to maintain it. You have to justify your worth out loud. If you save them 50 hours of project management time through an automated script, put that on a slide deck and present it at the quarterly business review. Show them the value. Okay, moving to strategy 3, building in-house tech. This is a big one, but I need to be very clear here. This is not what you think it is. The data shows that 50% of localization companies are currently building their own proprietary technology. That's a huge percentage. Now let's burst a bubble for you. They are not trying to build the next foundational LLM. Good grief, no. They do not have the billions of dollars in venture capital required to compete with the massive tech giants in Silicon Valley. And trying to do so would be absurd, an absolute financial suicide mission for a language provider. What these smart companies are actually building, the tech they are investing their capital in, are BMS, business management systems, and TMS, translation management systems. And I can hear you asking, why is a management system the secret weapon in an era of AI? Because the real irreplaceable value of a language provider in 2026 isn't just knowing the language anymore. The AI knows the language. The value is in managing a chaotic, fragmented, wildly unpredictable global supply chain of humans and machines. Think about the reality of a massive enterprise project. You have a product launch in 50 languages that requires a hyper-complex mix of AI translation for the basic manuals, human post-editing for the marketing copy, voiceover talent for the video ads, desktop publishing to fix the formatting in Arabic, and localized legal review for the compliance documentation. It's a logistical nightmare. Managing that workflow, handling the invoicing, ensuring military-grade file security, and processing vendor payments across 36 time zones. That logistical nightmare is the actual problem the buyer wants you to solve. By building a proprietary, seamless business management system, you are making that chaos totally invisible to the client. You aren't selling translation. You are selling order. You are selling peace of mind. The tech you build in-house should be designed to make your human project managers superhuman, not to try and replace them. But let's be real. What if you are in the other 50%? What if you are a boutique agency and you simply don't have the capital runway to hire a team of developers to build a custom BMS? You aren't dead in the water. That leads us to strategy 4, strategic technology partnerships. I have seen smaller agencies execute this brilliantly. If you can't build it yourself, you rent it. You partner up. And this creates a really beautiful synergistic dynamic in the market right now. Think of it like a racing team. Let the software nerds build the engine while you focus entirely on driving the car. You go out and find a pure, lean technology company that is building cutting-edge AI workflow tools, but who possess zero human linguists to actually execute the final mile of work. They have the tech, but no service arm. You partner with them. You deeply integrate their software into your service offering. The client gets an incredibly smooth, technologically advanced ride. They get the fancy dashboards, and you didn't have to spend a single dime of your own capital on the R&D to build the engine. It is the perfect symbiotic relationship for this adjustment period. The technology company gets immediate distribution, user feedback, and practical application of their software at scale. And the language provider gets to offer enterprise-grade, bleeding-edge tech solutions to their clients without the crushing overhead of a development team. You get to focus entirely on the service layer, the high-touch account management, and the final human quality while explicitly leveraging someone else's brilliant engineering. Which brings us to the final strategy. Strategy 5, linguist education and upskilling. And honestly, this might be the most crucial immediate takeaway for the individuals listening right now who are worried about their specific jobs. It is the absolute final piece of the puzzle because, at the end of the day, the human element is still the primary interface with the client. You can no longer just be good at grammar. A project manager or a senior linguist whose only defense is knowing how to conjugate complex verbs is going to be eaten alive by a modern, data-driven procurement manager. I've sat in on these calls. They are tough calls. When a client calls you up and says, look, I just read an article claiming that this new AI model can localize my entire software user interface automatically in seconds. Why on earth am I paying you a premium? You have to have an answer. Your staff cannot just fall back on the old tropes. They cannot just say, well, human quality is just better. It feels more natural. That is not a technical defense. That is an opinion, and buyers don't care about opinions anymore. Your staff must understand the actual mechanics of how LLMs operate. They need to deeply understand concepts like token limits, context windows, and training data biases. So when that aggressive client says AI can do this for free, your project manager can calmly, technically, and confidently say, actually, we tested that model. An LLM fundamentally struggles with the spatial constraints of your software-specific user interface because it lacks visual context. Furthermore, its underlying training data for the specific regional dialect you are targeting is incredibly weak, which will result in immediate brand degradation and user drop-off. Give them the facts. The human value you are paying us for is the structural and cultural adaptation that the AI's algorithm literally, mathematically cannot process. You have to empower your staff to confidently articulate exactly why human value is a hard requirement for that specific granular task. Technical education is your only armor against the hype. Before we get into the final takeaways, just a reminder that you can find more insights like this at locanuku.com, giving you the foresight you need to navigate these major industry shifts. The Great Adjustment isn't a theory anymore. It is a brutal sink or swim reality. There is nowhere left to hide in the middle ground. The legacy models are burning down. The per-word rate is actively suffocating margins, and the buyers are demanding the moon for pennies. It is forcing absolutely everyone in this space, from the solo freelance linguist grinding out MTPE, all the way up to the enterprise CEO managing global pipelines, to fundamentally prove their worth in a technically rigorous way they never had to before. It truly is a crucible moment. And if you take one defining thing away from everything we have unpacked today, let it be this. The future of the language industry isn't about competing with machines on price. It's about confidently charging for the specialized human expertise that makes those machines actually useful. You can print that on a t-shirt. That is the reality we have to operate in. But we always like to twist the knife just a little bit, leaving you with a final thought that pushes the boundaries of everything we just discussed. This raises an important question, and it is something you really need to ponder deeply as you look at your own long-term business models and the trajectory of our industry over the next decade. We know as a mathematical fact that AI is driving the sheer computational cost of generating content down to effectively zero. We are rapidly entering a world that is going to be completely overflowing with an infinite volume of AI-generated text, articles, corporate emails, back-end code, marketing manuals, all being pumped out by the millisecond. So what happens to our value proposition when there is vastly more synthetic content in the world than human eyes could ever possibly read, let alone expertly verify? In a purely synthetic AI-generated world, how will you and how will our industry accurately price trust and authenticity? How do you put a hard price tag on a human guarantee in an endless sea of synthetic noise? And this was your industry update from Locanuku, localization news you can use. The biggest takeaway today is that trust, verification, and technical mastery are your true products now.